Hello, hello. We are back again with another daily recap. Nick and Rob here from AWS Developer Relations Team. Rob, no keynote today. It feels almost weird saying that after many keynotes across many weeks, across many days here at reInvent. But nonetheless, we had an action-packed day here on the AWS On Air channel.
Yeah, definitely. Week 3, day 2 of the first ever digital online reInvent. How you feeling, Nick? I know you've been covering a lot of different sessions as you usually do, but today was especially busy.
Yeah. I mean, on the so stage setting for folks that may be tuning in to reInvent just this week for the first time. There have been sessions that have been launching all throughout the weeks, rolling out on an ongoing basis throughout the catalog. There have been obviously these keynotes and these large leadership sessions and so on. And then we've been running this AWS On Air live stream channel here. If you're tuning in, you're either in the reInvent platform or you're on Twitch. If you're here on Twitch, we actually have a link to registration and some other goodies you can get inside of the reInvent platform. So we encourage you to do that. But I figured we could talk a little bit about what we covered today. I'll try to get that through that pretty quickly. Then I know that there were some new sessions that you checked out today, Rob. So want to hear all about that. And with the remainder of our time, we could look at what is on the horizon for tomorrow, the last day of reInvent, or reInvent Wave One, or whatever we're calling this entire time of the year now, right? So why don't we do just that? I'm gonna pop over here. Cool. So this is a blog post. It's right here on the AWS News blog. I will, if you're in Twitch, I'll throw that link in the chat for you. But this is the blog where we will be continuously updating the schedule for the live streaming track here. We've got this little link to come find us inside the reInvent platform if you're watching there. But more importantly, let's zoom in a little bit. We've got the content that we have been broadcasting all day. First up, you're going to see this little recurring title here, AWS What's Next. This is the show that Rob and I usually run throughout the year where we talk about some of the newest launch content. There have certainly been, in typical fashion, a lot of launches at reInvent this year. And so we have these 30-minute blocks where other developer relations folks sit down with the service team and actually get hands-on with some of those new features, new services. So we saw Redshift data sharing, free RTOS long-term support, very exciting. Um, Additionally, we have the managed service for Prometheus that was newly announced in the Werner keynote just yesterday, as well as AWS or AWS Cloud Shell. Rob, I know we covered that yesterday on our end of day recap. You got to get hands on with that. For anyone who didn't get to hear your thoughts on that or initial impressions, you want to recap that quickly?
Yeah, well, AWS Cloud Shell, I mean, this is one of these things we seem to run into a lot of these where you and I look at them and go, that's a really good idea. Isn't it obvious, right? And I mentioned when we were on the What's Next segment earlier today when we were talking to the Mac instance team for EC2. Uh, Good ideas often seem obvious in retrospect, right? Take Airbnb for example is one of my favorites. Also, an AWS customer. You know, when you look at a company like that or a business like that, your first knee-jerk reaction is like, well, duh, yeah, that should exist. But there's a couple things that are kind of intuitive about that. One is that actually, before the company exists, before you know what it looks like, it's not quite obvious. I know that this is like a very trippy thing to kind of like get yourself into the mindset of imagining a world where something doesn't exist that you're already used to, that you've taken for granted, but it really isn't intuitive before it exists. And not only that, like what makes it special is often very subtle. And not and yet when these companies start off, they're also they go undergo so much transformation that they're not even recognizable from what they set out to do versus what they actually end up doing, right? I mean, just take Airbnb, the name alone. It stands for Air Bed and Breakfast. And the original vision for that company was to rent out literally inflatable air beds in a spare room that you weren't using. To think about all the pivots that that company went through, all the near-death experiences to get to where they are today, and then we still take it for granted, right? So all this to say is like when we talk about launches like Mac EC2 instances, AWS Cloud Shell, I know the reaction tends to be, well, duh. that's obvious. That's such a good idea that it's obvious. Why wasn't it here earlier in some cases for some of our more entitled customers? But really, like I think we have to slow down and appreciate this. It's like good ideas do not seemingly simple and good ideas, obviously good ideas. There's actually a tremendous amount of work, transformation, experimentation that goes into them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that a lot of it comes down to the execution, right? The idea or the broad shape of something may be buildable in a very short period of time, and really working out the nuances to make that a sustainable long-term service, especially with some of the features that we see in Cloud Shell, right? It's entirely free. It offers 1 GB of persistent free storage. I don't think those are decisions that were hastily made, right? And I'm very excited. I know customers are very excited to see those as the outcome. So better late than never, but I think it's those decisions and some of those delays are often due to some hard internal conversations about how to best deliver that for customers. So uh, happy to see it finally out. Following up on some of the what's next sessions, I actually got a chance to sit down on the Voice of the Customer series, where we talked to some of these lighthouse customers doing very exciting things across AWS. And while it's difficult to talk about everything on the AWS stack that they're using in just about 20 minutes for each of them, I got to hear some really cool stories from T-Mobile talking about how they're using AI and ML on AWS. And they were, in fact, one of the original customers that use SageMaker Ground Truth. They were trying to label incoming call data so that they can more effectively train models to route their customers to agents. I spoke with Vanguard talking about how they've been migrating their data from on-premises systems up into the cloud, and the rapid pace of that migration being made possible with a lift and shift, and then eventually some more cloud native optimizations down the line, but enabling some analytics across the organization. And then lastly, I got to talk to both Piedmont Healthcare, which is a medical services company based in Atlanta here in the United States. And they, like many other long-standing healthcare companies, were running Epic Epic systems. Epic is another software provider in the space that builds software solutions or integrated software solutions for the healthcare space. There's lots of reasons why that's very fundamental that I won't get into here. But essentially, Deloitte helped them to migrate off of their on-premises data center with those Epic workloads fully into AWS in about 6 weeks, and their initial POC in infrastructure costs alone cost about $300. And again, Piedmont previous to this was, I believe they were actually upgrading their hardware with trucks that would come into their data center on an annual basis. So when we're talking about migrating to the cloud, it's a little more than just incremental gains. This is a fundamental shift in how you're investing in your infrastructure and what your cost structure looks like, moving away from that huge capex and those long-term ROIs into more persistent, fine-grained OpEx. So yeah, some really exciting discussions there. And then we got into a whole slew of what's next sessions here. Again, diving deep. Rob, you and I were sitting down with some of the folks behind the EC2 Mac Instance Launch. That was very, very exciting. You and I know we've been geeking out about this the last few weeks, but we got to learn a few exciting things about what went into actually creating this consumer available service in Mac OS AMIs on the EC2 platform.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a very interesting conversation because I know Mac instances is it's one of our most exciting launches from reInvent this year, and it's something that customers have been asking for a long time. Even despite that, it's something that I was personally skeptical about. There's a lot of things like API gateway, WebSocket support that really, as far as I'm concerned, they're coming out of left field. In both the way the speed at which they arrive, the feature set that they launch with, and the maturity on day one. I really like all of those things. I mean, those are all critical things when you're talking about production workloads that need the highest reliability. And it's just incredible to see these things that come together at this pace. This is, this is exactly why we have reInvent every year, right? Because there's so many feature announcements and so many launches, and this is our one time of the year when we can kind of gather all those in one place. I know it's and as a customer, it's a challenge to kind of stay abreast of all the announcements and feature launches and changes in services, and to understand what kinds of services are best suited to solve your problem. So it's just, this year has just been incredible, right? We've done a lot of incredible work despite a lot of the challenges, and it's just so great to see us being able to sit down with these service teams and these subject matter experts and talk shop.
Yeah, you know what's has me thinking. When we spoke with that team, and this was available to anyone who saw the initial announcement. A big a big enabler of this Mac OS EC2 instance launch was the Nitro system. And the thing that sort of boggles my mind is that, obviously, Rob, you and I, we work with some of these teams leading up to some of their launches, but a lot or most of these launches that we see here at reInvent, you and I are only hearing about for the first time, as they're announced in keynotes. And what that makes me think about very deeply is, what are the equivalents of Nitro that we saw launched that enabled something like the Mac EC2 instance, that no one connected those dots, right? No one looked at that, and maybe some of the best on stage that had announced it, and there's a select few people in the audience were able to hypothesize that, but I didn't hear any of those rummagings, right? I'm trying to think, what were those foundational announcements that may have flown a little bit under the radar this year that enable further downstream, like game changers like Mac EC2 instances? I'm not asking us to speculate here. This is not the conspiracy theory variety hour, as much as some people may believe it is. But that's that's what's going to be on my mind after this reInvent, right? What are the things that are going to enable further downstream mechanisms like that? I mean, there are so many monumental launches from this year alone that we could spend all time talking about that, but that's what's going to be in the back of my head.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that is certainly a piece of low hanging fruit, if you're going to ask that question, is the prevalence of ARM chips for general purpose compute, whether it be on a client machine or a server machine. And we see this with the Graviton 2 chip. This was launched a little while ago, and the team has been working hard ever since to kind of expand the availability of different kinds of instances that are optimized for general purpose compute, memory, network, machine learning, etc. But the the key takeaway with the Graviton 2 processor, again, the Graviton 2 processor is a custom processor built by AWS, or designed by AWS, and it uses the ARM architecture, and it is a 64 core chip. This is a server chip that is it's a 64 core chip. It uses a 7 nanometer fabrication process, and this is a chip that is able to deliver 40% performance improvement in a variety of workloads at a lower price point, while being 2 to 3.5 times more power efficient. Um, those are all different dimensions of metrics that matter, but they're monumental leaps in every single one of them. And Werner and Peter both talked about the importance of of being aware of your carbon footprint, and we see this coming up all over the place, right? Whenever you have a large workload, um, the naive thing that you can do is you can just kind of total up the amount of electricity that workload uses, and then go look up the price per kilowatt hour, and you kind of have a rough carbon footprint equation there. But there's two parts of it that are really interesting. One is, we heard the statistic that it's 88% more efficient to run your workloads, your application workloads, in the data center in a cloud computing data center like AWS than it is to run it on premise, for a variety of reasons that we can go into, but we probably won't have too much time to go dive too deep. But the other part of it is like things like these changes to ARM, right? This is now a competitive business advantage. If your business has a goal to cut down on carbon emissions by a certain amount, think about how much the Graviton 2 processor or migration from x86 to ARM can assist in that journey by being 2 to 3.5 times more power efficient. Think about that. That's like an ace up your sleeve on your journey to carbon neutral or zero carbon, or whatever whatever the metric may be, whatever the timeline may be. And this can become a key differentiator for your business.
Yeah, exactly. When we're thinking about some of the things we expect to see in keynotes, that that ability of AWS to innovate on the ecological side, to then pass that down as, in a way, a feature and an ability for customers to then have another reason for being able to choose AWS Cloud. Always an exciting one, right? Not giving customers some sort of choice that they don't want to have to make between a performant or an ecological option. You can have the best of both worlds with Graviton too.
Yeah. And another thing I think I wanted to say really quick about that is, this is another great example of the investments that we make at the scale of AWS, right? as at our scale, an investment in custom silicon like this makes sense. But imagine if you're working in a medium-sized enterprise company. Let's say that you're handling large amounts of data and you rely on workloads that do a lot of data processing. Okay, let's just say it's like a 400-person company, and you and I are
Mhm.
working at this company. We're gonna have a really, really hard case making that case to upper management, executives, the owner perhaps, to say like, hey, guess what? I've got an idea. Why don't we design custom silicon? They're gonna look at us like we're crazy. This is a company, this is a 400-person company whose mission is to solve a data processing need, right? They're not gonna go and design a custom chip to reduce their carbon footprint. It's just not feasible.
Yeah.
But when they work with AWS, it is. And that's on top of all the other benefits in terms of like agility and capex and opex. So the accrued benefits really start to add up when you start to look at it that way. And that's one of the things that I always come back to is like so many of these innovations, they only make sense at certain scales. And that's why cloud computing makes sense for so many different kinds of workloads now. You really have to look at your business and look at some of the things that you're doing and be very critical about, is this critical? Is this actually what makes my business special? Because in the vast majority of cases, designing a custom chip to reduce your carbon footprint is not one of those things that makes your business special.
Certainly so, right? There's the ability. Just because you can does not mean you should. And as for everybody, but especially smaller companies, time is one of your most valuable resources, right? If you're spending significant staff time on building something that is not the key competitive advantage, one of your competitors will be better innovating on behalf of the shared customers that you have. So we want to handle that work because that's what gets us very excited, and we'd love to help our customers focus on their own customers as effectively as possible. But in our remaining budget of time here, we've got a few more What's Next sessions that have aired today. Again, these are not available immediately on demand. They were live sessions. We will be getting those as on-demand clips following reInvent. We don't have an exact time, date, or location on that at the moment, but stay tuned. We will be looking forward to sharing that with you. Now, here we are to the daily recap. That's what we're doing right now, right here in the moment. We're doing it. We're live. And then following this, we have quite a few shows. We have the certification quiz show with ML Power Hour, an industry live session for retail, and all in the field, AWS Agriculture Live, augmented cattle feed, a talk with Grove Technologies. That certainly sounds exciting, and I'm going to be staying on, even though I won't be on camera for that one. But I know that this is just the live track, right? We have an entire session catalog that you may not have seen yet. And if you have, you should probably check it out again because there's some new updates and additional content. Rob, I know you've checked out quite a few of those sessions today. Are there any highlights that you want to share with everybody at home?
Yeah, definitely. And the way to do this is, as I'm talking about some of these sessions, just try and remember the keywords in the title of the session, and then when you search for that, that session should come up. And again, these sessions are available on demand. You can view them anytime you want. This is an invitation to explore the catalog and the related tracks a little bit more. So without further ado, I found 6 sessions that kind of jumped out at me. Again, these are based on my personal interests. The first one here is containers at AWS, more options and power than ever before. And what I really like about this talk is that it just dives headfirst into the problem, where we have, so in our containers offering space, we have Fargate, ECS, and EKS. And customers ask us all the time, what's the difference? When should I use which one? What are the pros and cons? What are the trade-offs? If you've ever had those questions, this is the talk for you. Again, that's containers at AWS, more options and power than ever before. Next up, we have the how AWS Global Accelerator improves performance. Now, Global Accelerator is technically part of our global network, and the Global Accelerator is basically I almost have trouble describing what it is exactly in the sense that, but I can tell you what it does. It gets your traffic onto the AWS global network, which is a dedicated global network, as the name implies, where your traffic is going through fewer hops, fewer exchanges, and competing less and less with other public internet traffic. And this has a variety of applications one of which is gaming, because a lot of developers, a lot of customers in the gaming industry use Global Accelerator to deliver higher performance for their games. Nick, I know you talked to a couple of gaming customers very recently. How does Global Accelerator fit in there?
Yeah, when you're trying to build distributed systems, you have trade-offs all across the board between cost and latency and resiliency and durability. But especially when we're thinking about the idea of network traffic and building latency compensation systems with some sort of central authority. Let's say you have a bunch of friends, you're all in a certain part of town, and there's a nearby server in a local zone or an AWS region. There are certain design trade-offs that are made by the game publisher based on the expected latency between you and that game server. Now, there are ways to design systems that account for more or less latency, but ultimately, completely unstable or extremely variable latency, at least for individuals, can be a really off putting experience because there's no perfect way to handle it. You'll get things like characters jumping around on the screen or them looking like they're teleporting around, which is not a good experience for anybody. And so Global Accelerator enables you to have this more consistent network and traffic behavior such that you as a game designer can design for a smaller and more narrow band to dial the game in so it can feel a little bit better for all of your players that are connecting in a multiplayer scenario.
Yeah, very well put. And if you played games, you know how frustrating packet loss is. You know how frustrating jittery ping is, especially if it's a first-person shooter. So this helps. Games built on this definitely are better experiences. Next up, we have AWS Lambda, optimizing your serverless applications. This is a two-part talk, and this just kind of takes you through soup to nuts of how to optimize serverless applications, how you profile them, how you deploy them in ways that are more measurable. And this is a question that's come up kind of in proportion to the rise of the serverless architectures that we see all across and the rapid adoption of Lambda.
Yeah, this is again first year online reInvent, but this is a new trend in what seem like a series of talks that are repeated each year but amended and updated. That I would give this as required reading for anybody that is in the serverless space. Right, a two-part series that sort of soup to nuts covers everything serverless. I think the other one that I'm thinking of is the Rick Houlihan single table design or DynamoDB. Single table design methodology where all of the trade-offs involved there, which has now become a two-parter, if I remember correctly. So definitely something that folks should check out.
Yeah. And then in the security section, we have using AWS WAF, Windows application, Web Application Firewall is what WAF stands for, and AWS Secrets Manager to enforce Amazon CloudFront origins. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but you can search for WAF, Secrets Manager, and CloudFront. These three tools. I mean, CloudFront, Secrets Manager. These are just. I feel like these two services are going to show up in nearly every single AWS project because they're just so useful, right? I almost have a hard time imagining how you do, standards management of security, rotation of keys without Secrets Manager. It's just. These are just such core services. And if nothing else, when you attend a talk like this, you'll learn how we think about these services and how they fit into your typical or your common AWS architectures.
Certainly. I've just noticed that we're about time as usual. Rob, you and I can go on and on and on. I wish we could. Maybe we should just get our own channel next year. It's just a 24/7 stream of just us nonstop. But the show goes on with some other exciting content. So immediately following this daily recap, stay on the line. We will have the certification quiz show, Machine Learning Power Hour with John Dion, MJ Bailey, and I'm sure a whole host of exciting cast members. Following that at 6 p.m. PST, we have the industry live session for retail and then all in the field. If you're looking for content in other languages and localized recaps, we've got that all throughout the night. Link to the schedules in chat. Without further ado, Rob and Nick signing off here for the English Daily Recap here at day 2 of week 3 of reInvent Wave 1. All right, that was a mouthful. We'll see you. Stay tuned. See you again tomorrow.